Okay, let's dive right into this fascinating explainer on the extreme biomechanical hurdles that mammals had to face when making that crazy evolutionary leap from land back into the water. Because, when you see a dolphin effortlessly gliding through the ocean, it's honestly pretty easy to forget that its ancient ancestors used to walk around on four legs. Transitioning from a gravity-dominated world of air into a dense, heavy, viscous aquatic environment, that required an absolutely breathtaking, near-impossible physical transformation.
In fact, back in 1859, Charles Darwin pondered a massive mystery about this very thing. He essentially asked, how could land animals evolve into whales without just completely dying out during that awkward, highly inefficient transitional phase? Think about it. If an animal is stuck in the middle, right, not really a great runner anymore, but not exactly a great swimmer either, how on earth does it compete and survive long enough to pass on its genes?
It's such a brilliant question. Water is a completely hostile environment for a creature built to fight gravity. So how did they survive the plunge? Locomotion in water relies on totally different physical principles than moving on land. Suddenly, you're dealing with buoyancy pushing you up, massive drag holding you back, and you have to constantly generate thrust just to get anywhere. It was basically a brutal physics exam that every single transitional species had to pass.
So, here is our roadmap to solving this mystery. We're going to cover Darwin's vexing question, the two kinds of swimmers, the wall of water, paddles versus hydrofoils, and finally, the cost of transport.
Starting with part 1, Darwin's vexing question and the evolutionary middle ground. Well, modern semi-aquatic mammals, like minks and otters, actually serve as perfect living analogs to those ancient evolutionary intermediates.
Moving to part 2, two kinds of swimmers, semi-aquatic versus fully aquatic. To really grasp these physical challenges, we need to compare the awkward transitional mammals with the incredibly graceful specialized ones.
When we stack their biological toolkits side by side, the divide is literally stunning. Semi-aquatic animals generally stick to fresh water, they hang out near the surface, and they rely on drag to push themselves forward. In total contrast, fully aquatic mammals rule the marine world, dive to mind-boggling depths, sometimes over 2,000 meters, and they generate lift to swim.
And here is a totally crucial point. While fur keeps an otter warm and afloat, it actually actively restricts them from diving deep, which is exactly where swimming is much easier. Fur traps air, right? So that creates positive buoyancy. Just imagine trying to swim to the bottom of a pool while wearing a life jacket. You have to fight the whole way down. But blubber? Blubber is a stroke of evolutionary genius. It insulates, acts as an energy reserve, doesn't compress and ruin buoyancy under pressure, and it literally sculpts the animal's body into a sleek, low-drag torpedo. That brings us to part 3, the wall of water and physics at the surface. Let's talk about how this surface swimming habit builds an invisible, exhausting wall for our semi-aquatic friends.
When swimming at the surface, mammals hit something called wave drag. This is a force that can be up to 5 times greater than normal frictional drag. 5 times! Every single time a mink or a muskrat moves forward, a huge chunk of its muscular energy isn't even going into forward motion. It's literally being stolen from them to create those ripples and waves you see fanning away on the water's surface.
It turns out, an animal's body pushing through the surface acts almost exactly like the displacement hull of a ship. As the animal moves, it generates complex waves. You've got divergent waves that fan out and transverse waves that move perpendicular to its path. The interaction between these two types of waves dictates exactly how exhausting that swim is going to be.
Now, at low speeds, the transverse waves can actually cancel each other out. This creates temporary little sweet spots of energy efficiency. Biologists and engineers call these hollows in the drag curve. The animal basically finds a rhythm where the crest of one wave perfectly destructively interferes with the trough of another, saving them some precious energy.
But as soon as the animal tries to swim faster, the wavelength of that bow wave stretches out along its body. And just like that, the sweet spot is gone. The crests and troughs start to synchronize rather than cancel out, which violently spikes the total drag acting on the animal's body.
Eventually, the bow wave stretches to equal the exact length of the animal itself. It becomes effectively trapped in the trough of its own wave. This is a hard physical speed limit called hull speed. To swim even a fraction faster than this, the animal would literally have to swim uphill over its own bow wave. It is energetically devastating, which is exactly why you almost never see semi-aquatic mammals swimming faster than this strict physical limit when they're at the surface.
Section 4. Paddles versus hydrofoils and the propulsion problem.
So how on earth do they push through all this resistance?
Well, semi-aquatic mammals use drag-based paddling. Think of a doggy paddle. When a beaver or an otter paddles, it pushes water back during the power stroke, but then it has to yank its foot back forward through the water just to take another stroke. That recovery phase generates drag in the exact wrong direction, actively fighting the animal's own forward momentum. It's a really clunky start and stop way to travel, especially compared to the continuous wing-like lift of a whale's flukes.
Fully aquatic mammals evolved to turn their limbs into highly tuned, long and slender underwater wings that just slice through the ocean. Cetaceans and pinnipeds sweep these hydrofoils through the water at roughly a 30-degree angle of attack. This creates lift, just like an airplane wing, but that lift is directed forward as thrust. And because they're sweeping back and forth continuously without that messy recovery stroke, they achieve an astonishing 75 to 90% propulsive efficiency.
Moving on to Part 5, the cost of transport and the energetic math. Let's look at the ultimate metabolic receipt for these two totally different swimming styles.
Biologists use a metric called the cost of transport to compare energetic efficiency. Think of it as the miles per gallon rating for an animal. We calculate the metabolic power input, factor out body mass and speed, and then compare it to salmonid fish, because fish are basically the absolute gold standard for aquatic efficiency.
Prepare to be completely amazed by this. Paddling at the surface is so inefficient that a mink spends up to 24 times more energy to swim than a fish of the exact same size. 24 times. The mink holds the record for the highest cost of transport of any mammalian swimmer ever measured. They are stuck using an ancestral quadrupedal doggy paddle right at the surface, fighting that massive wave drag we talked about. It is an absolute metabolic furnace.
On the flip side, fully aquatic mammals evolved to dive below the wave drag completely. By submerging past the surface disturbance, usually at least 3 body diameters down, that brutal wave drag just vanishes entirely. Add in those highly efficient hydrofoil wings, and dolphins and whales can drop their energetic costs down to nearly match the perfect efficiency of a fish, cruising for thousands of miles on minimal energy.
But of course, nature always throws us a curveball. The platypus paddles at the surface too, but it has a surprisingly low energetic cost. Even though it's a drag-based swimmer, its cost of transport is only about 2.4 times that of a fish. How is that possible? Well, its rowing motion actually mimics the efficient lift-based flipper strokes of sea lions. Plus, the platypus is a master of hypometabolism. It radically drops its heart rate, a state called bradycardia when it's in the water, which slashes its baseline energy costs. It's basically a living, breathing blueprint of an evolutionary transition.
Finally, Section 6. Darwin was right, the perfect compromise. Bringing us full circle, we can finally answer the dilemma from 1859.
Yes, semi-aquatic mammals are incredibly energetically inefficient in the water compared to whales, but they are perfectly adapted compromises. Their anatomy is this exquisite balancing act. If a mink had a whale's tail, it couldn't walk on land to build a den. If it had pure blubber instead of fur, it would overheat on a warm summer day. They accept those brutal energetic costs in the water because it gives them the ultimate flexibility to conquer two completely different worlds at the exact same time.
It really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? What other seemingly inefficient, awkward animals out there are actually perfectly balanced evolutionary masterpieces hidden in plain sight? The next time you see a muskrat furiously paddling across a pond, don't think of it as a bad swimmer. Think of it as an incredibly successful survivor, actively balancing the opposing physical forces of two worlds, exactly like the ancestors of the mighty whales did millions of years ago.